I do miss Lindsay's double thumb. Sorry, right at the start.
Wow, just rugged my
Right
intro.
at the start.
That's okay.
Anyway,
That's okay.
Lindsay, she gave thumbs up, and there were fireworks everywhere. It was great and amazing. Sorry. This is the Rise Up After Dark episode. David, like we said, it was very professional.
That's 3 glumps right off the bat.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is Rise Up After Dark. Good now and welcome. And there's a glump for William. This is the place where we let our hair down. We BYOB and DYOR with our friends and expert guests in the industry. Tonight we've got David Wolinsky of Aptos Labs, and we're going to introduce him in just a second, but we want to let you know that if this is your first time with us, we are so glad you're here. You can find us Monday through Thursday at 7 a.m., Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and on every social platform you love, including podcast streaming platforms. Thank you very much. We're now on Spotify. We're now on Apple Podcasts. All you got to do is search the Rise Up Morning Show and you'll find us. We would love to have you in the audience. Wherever you are on the crypto spectrum, whether you're skeptical, you're a beginner, or you're working in the industry full time, this is a great place for you to ask a question, share what you know, and we say, rise up together. So no further ado, let me just say a big thank you and welcome to our guest for tonight, Mr. David Wolinsky. David, thanks so much for being on the show. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Well, I mean, it's been a great day so far. We started out this morning with a space about Aptos, talking about all the cool technology we're bringing to the forefront of Web3. And, I get to end my day with you folks being more than just Twitter Spaces. We're all over social media thanks to you folks, and super stoked to be here.
Man, we are so glad to have you. Can I give you just a quick introduction for people who don't know who you are, and then invite you to fill in the cracks where we miss it so we can get started?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, because we'd love to hear more, but you got to know, if you don't know, that David is the co-founder of Aptos, one of many co-founders. This is a next-gen L1 blockchain designed for speed, real-world problem solving. And before launching Aptos, David was a key figure in Meta's Web3 division, where he contributed to the Diem blockchain, formerly known as Libra. This is Meta's ambitious attempt to build a global digital currency and programmable financial infrastructure. He's got a PhD in computer engineering from the University of Florida. He's lectured and researched at Yale, so maybe he knows the Popovich family. And maybe he's graced us with his knowledge of cryptography, infrastructure. I think he's going to bring a lot of academic insight, but also practical experience from industry leadership to our show. So that is the groundwork for the questions you can ask him tonight. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions. So while we wait for those, David, what did I miss? And do you, in fact, know Alex's mom from Yale University?
I unfortunately have not had a chance to.
I hear it's a big school.
Yeah. So I'm, for better or worse, we'll have to figure that one out. I mean, I can go into a little bit more depth in there for a little bit more fun.
Please do.
I mean, you went back and you talked a bit about my PhD. I think the fun thing there was, getting early into decentralization. And so we were really excited about trying to figure out how we could get people to just establish direct networking links with each other. And if you know anything about that time and era, which I don't know how many folks may or not, this is early 2000s.
We ask folks to assume that they don't. Our people are at all levels of experience. So tell us the time and tell us what it was like.
So this is the era where we saw like the forefront of Napster, Kazaa, LimeWire. I think even there was an Audio Galaxy, but it was, how do we get, questionable content distributed to our friends so that they can enjoy the same music that we're listening to? And this is after the era where we were sharing CDs or copied CDs with each other and onto MP3s. And it was all about we want to get this seamlessly with each other. And so all this technology came to the forefront. It kind of worked, a lot of weird things happened, but fundamentally, what my research is just figuring out, how do we actually go one layer deeper and just make it so you can get seamlessly connected across the board? Because Windows has file sharing built into it. Your games, you might want to play a game directly with your friend. You might have other applications or exercises that you're just looking for, and you need to be connected to each other directly. And in this era, that didn't really exist. There was no forum for that. There was no applications. And so we were kind of at the forefront of just figuring out how do we scale this up so that anybody and everybody could effectively be having fun in this space, especially where you're like, hey, I want to go in and set up this with my family, my friends. So we then concocted, how do we do social networking on top of it? But, long story short, lots of deep exploration in how we start to explore the foundations of decentralized computing, networking, which is kind of like where, blockchains and the technology that we're going to be talking about today, kind of like we're built on top of, and can, vastly expand the space from there. And so I did that for a while and got pretty far. We actually built out something that was kind of like a decentralized Amazon Web Services. So, researchers are always like, I've got to solve these hard problems. I've got to do these complex computations. Never have enough resources. Well, sometimes you do, but it's always like, if you got a research paper due the next day, I need to slam my computations really badly. I need to get as much access. So we built out these services that allowed people to collaborate, bring together all these things. And so it's kind of like the crowning achievement of that work. It was effectively seeing different universities, kind of like I think we had 5 to 6 different universities, all sharing resources with each other, all getting their research done much more quickly. And I said, okay, this has been really fun, but I'm actually really much more interested in what it means to provide privacy and security inside of this space. And so I went off into a completely different tangent, explored anonymous communication. This was what I did at Yale. I did that for about 4 years. And so we continued down the decentralization narrative, but I actually took a different approach, which is, if I want to share concepts and ideas or get access to content, and I don't want to necessarily reveal my identity, whether this is for voting purposes or I'm in a environment in which, free speech is not supported, how do I go about doing that in a way that I don't risk getting into trouble with, entities and whatnot? So a lot of cryptography, a lot of math, and then a lot of system building, a lot of complex challenges in that space. But what was really great about that was the intersection with blockchains. And so this was, I think 2011 to 2015, Bitcoin had started getting a little bit of popularity. I think you could still buy less than 1 pizza per Bitcoin. I think the ratio was really bad.
Less than 1 pizza.
Yeah. Like a fraction,
I love that.
Yeah, fractional pizzas with your Bitcoin. And so it was great to actually go into the research field and see that people are starting to bring crypto blockchains to the research domain. And we actually saw Zcash at one of the early conferences, and it was just exciting to see the technology that was coming to that space. But I kind of like dismissed it, saying, you know what, they're so far away from actually getting into like the practicality of what they're trying to do there. And I'm much more excited about my own esoteric research in anonymous communication. And then 2015 hit, and I was kind of just contemplating myself, wow, I'm an old man now. Mind you, that was 10 years ago, so I'm a really old man now. And I'm like, what do I want to see? I'm like, I think it's time to take a shift away from this exploratory space and try to do something a bit more practical, funnel more money into my pocket, and maybe a little bit more work-life balance, because, the PhD, the academic life is a full-time, there's a PhD balance, they say, not a work-life balance. And so I headed off to Facebook, got deep into ads, got to learn a lot about how organizations work, because academia is so different than the rest of how the real world works. I would say like a startup is kind of like academia, except you don't have to worry about runway. You just worry about whether or not you can get your PhD. And so it's a much safer, happier place. And but heading off to Facebook, a lot of really hard, interesting problems really helped me kind of evolve and transform from like a nerd that was super deep into tech to figuring out how to have basic human conversations.
David, can I ask you just a quick question to clarify? Like, was it that easy? You were like, you know what? I'm tired of researching. You called Zuck, and he was like, yeah, man, come on. What was that like? Was it simply that easy?
I mean, I goddamn wish it was. I mean, to just share transparently on this, I almost got fired from Facebook.
Well, like before, like right after you got hired, how did you
Yeah,
even get hired
yeah.
there? And then what did you do to get almost fired? Also, I'm gonna ding you for that. I didn't say it on the stream, but in case you hear that sound, that just means we've given you a point for something. It's arbitrary. They don't matter. And whoever gets the most at the end is gonna get a fabulous prize. So, don't let it dismay you. But points for Facebook. Tell us more.
Yeah. So I mean, I went in there with the belief that I am invincible. I am the smartest person. I can solve all problems. Facebook is lucky to have me. And ego was huge. I had spent a decade in academia. I knew everything. And, the reality is I tried to find areas where I would be really excited to work on things. And it didn't particularly work out that way. I landed on a team. The team was, before I didn't fully realize what was going on in the team, but it was actually going through a lot of internal massive dynamic changes. And me coming from academia, I looked at what was going on. I looked at what I knew I was capable of. I said, oh, there seems to be a mismatch here. But I'd also spent way too much time kind of getting to that point. This was like, Facebook had a boot camp program back in the day where you join, you explore teams, you'd land on the team that was the best fit for you. So I spent way too much long in boot camp. I landed on a team. 3 months later, they dissolved, and I'm like, wait, this is a little bit weird. I'm about 9 months in. I don't feel comfortable. I probably should go back to boot camp or find a new team. It didn't really work out that well. And I was basically said, I was told, we don't really want you on this team anymore because we can see you don't feel like you're a good fit. We don't think you're a good fit. And you can go find another team. And so at that point in time, I'm like, crap, okay, let me go find another team. But what super clear to me was the whole process that went through this. I had rubbed people a little bit the wrong way. And so they were actively trying to say, like, David doesn't seem like he's a good fit for Facebook at all. And so I reached out to probably 30, 40, 50 different teams at Facebook. And it was a handful of teams that said, you've got a little bit of interest and reputation with you, David, but we're gonna take that risk and we're gonna just reset it and we're gonna go and have fun. So I actually ended up landing on an ads platform team. And my ego had now been massively reset back to
a healthy deflation.
Massive healthy deflation. But it really helped kind of like begin that process of figuring out what is the gap between what is really great from being able to do fundamental and great research to what it means to be effectively working with other humans. And so, I as much as that process was painful, I think it was probably one of the greatest experiences in my life that helped me get to the position in which I am today and really understand, the nuances of building an organization, getting people motivated, keeping them along, and then, expanding beyond just what we're doing internally, but, a lot of what happens externally, which, building out a layer one technology is a lot about ecosystem building. But I'm skipping ahead, and I'll quickly wrap up the story, or maybe not. Maybe you guys can say, David, you're rambling for too long, but so far I see good faces on everybody, so I'll just continue on.
We're professionals. Keep going. Tell us more. I want to hear, also specifically about behind the curtain of Diem, Libra. That's really interesting too. Whatever you'd care to spill.
Don't worry, I've got my story well good. I've given it a couple of times, so I'll keep going on until you guys want to cut me off.
Don't let us stop you.
Cool. So, I spent a good bit of time in that space. I think it was about 3-4 years. I started out as an engineer, moved my way up to tech lead, eventually became a tech lead manager. I was largely responsible for, I'd say, like 20 or so different engineers and figuring out what they're going to work on, driving an impact, making all the reports, helping us define what actual value is. And so I really understood the domain incredibly well. And mind you, I was taking a lot of the engineering perspective there because I came from the research background, but it helped me also understand the difference between what is just really exciting from an engineering perspective versus what actually matters from building products. And I think that's like one of the hardest challenges for engineers. And you can even see this a lot in the layer one space, because I think it's largely driven by like tech. And I think the reality is like changing it around and focusing more on where you want that tech to go is a really, really hard problem for engineers. And even to date, when I look at like an exciting problem, I really oftentimes get lost into how the infinitely many different exciting ways I can burn hours upon hours and not actually produce anything meaningful or useful for anybody else except for my own, hubris
Sure.
or ego.
Yeah,
But the
well,
nerd-
that's always been the challenge. So I've spent 9-10 years now as a sales and consultant rep, working with IT organizations and my own data scientists and the like. And like that's one of the biggest problems that organizations find is they'll develop a very like large pool of talents, great solutions that they've built themselves or acquired to handle whatever problems they are, be it for my experience, it was AI machine learning use cases across supply chain organizations and financial organizations. And the biggest problem they had were we have all these smart people, we have all this great tech, and they're all working and they're doing all this great stuff. But at the end of the day, when it comes to stuff to like deploy into the business, we don't have a whole lot, or it's really hard for us to deploy that. So you end up just kind of creating a bunch of science experiments for the most part that are very expensive. But that it's such a challenge to do that. And you're right. Cause like each in a company, you have your IT, you have your sales, you have your marketing, you have your operations, you have your finance, and all of them have a different brain. They all have an absolutely different brain with their own things they're great at and bad at. And you have to have all those pieces then just like work and collaborate together to make sure you're taking your product, creating a product fit for the market, and actually getting it out there in people's hands. It's an incredibly difficult challenge. It's like such a human challenge, but it's like, I don't know, just so much about human to human communication.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's an incredible journey. And I love to hear the stories of how like people can translate something, they got themselves so deep on something, and then they're like, oh, I had to step out for a moment, and here's the work I did to actually make that something useful or practical. And I think that's a constant journey. And the reality is in the tech space, we have so many solutions and that are searching for problems.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I heard somebody tweet the other day, like we've built a 10-lane highway and there's 4 cars, about all the infrastructure in crypto or whatever. It's a lot of problems in search of a solution.
Yeah.
Well, it is kind of nice we're at that point now with like throughput, TPS and all that. Because I remember just like 4 years ago, if you had, all you had to do is say your TPS was at a certain amount, hopefully maybe one day, and your project would explode because there was such a scalability problem. But now, for the large part, we've gotten the scalability, and now we're like, all right, cool, we have this. Now we need more cars, we need more people, we need more money, we need more users. How do we get this to the masses, right? So,
well, and there's a question in the chat about this
now
from our friend Tanner. He's a super talented developer himself. He's a CTO, and he's like, is it difficult? Has it been a challenge trying to be a one-size-fits-all chain? And it sounds like you've had a lot of experience with that kind of thing. And maybe you wouldn't describe Aptos that way, but I'm curious if Libra, Diem, if that was that way. You're trying to be a solution for everyone in the world on the internet, it seemed like.
Well, I can answer that question, but we can try to wrap up the story and then get into
Please.
the depths of what it means for Aptos. So, I eventually left that project in ads, largely for 2 reasons. One, I miss technology. I underline everything. I'm an engineer. I'm a tech. I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. Whatever the right words are there. I get excited about those problems. The broad organization, no challenges over time. It is what it is. And so I missed that. And so when we kicked off the Libra, then the Diem project over at Facebook, I kind of used my son's birth as an excuse to disconnect from ads and say, okay, I'll take a couple months off through the beautiful paternity leave and inject myself into something new. And so I was one of the last few hires that they made because they stopped getting headcount. And when I came in, I looked at everything and I'm like, wow, you guys have everything set. I don't even know why you brought me in here. And that was my first reaction. About 2 weeks later, I started realizing that, oh my God, this project has massively accumulated every single problem in the world, which you hit spot on there. And
that's a hell of a 180. Yeah.
Yes, it was just shocking because they had tried to put on the facade that made it look like they knew exactly what they had to do in order to get there. But you actually look under and you're like, wow, there's a lot of really hard, fun problems in the space, both from the technical perspective, but also all the other stuff that Facebook pulled themselves into. And so this is, from my perspective, the fundamental challenge that Facebook faced with their Libra and Diem, eventually Diem projects, was they made a lot of promises that they were going to solve all the world's problems from a financial perspective, but also get the US regulatory blessing at the same time. And so if you don't know what happened behind the scenes, and there's a lot of documents out there, But effectively, the first proposal was we're going to be relatively permissionless, and we're going to go through, I think it's the Swiss FINMA, their financial regulators, and they're going to bless this somehow or another. I don't even know what that really means, but I guess they'd be responsible for managing our stable coin.
Okay.
And what eventually happened was we realized we weren't going to go with like this bag of currencies of all of Europe, all of US, and all the other worlds to figure out like some magical basket that says this is a good representation of global universal value. And we said, we're just going to go US dollar backed. So we retracted from FINMA because I think they were not that bullish about being in that space. And we said, let's go through the Fed. And so this is the US Fed. This is, across the entire US. And the interesting thing with that strategy is there are a lot of stablecoins in the US. And there are a lot of crypto organizations that are licensed in the US. But guess what? Not a single one of them have ever gone to the Fed. They always go to the New York Fed, and then they kind of work their way, or the financial of New York, and they work their way through the US if they need to. But usually they get entered through the New York pathway, and they leverage that as a means to say, hey, we are good in New York, so we should be good everywhere else.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But nope, Facebook said we're going to go through the US Fed, and that's going to somehow work out. We did that early, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And I think it was effectively 4 years into the project, 3 years. This was June 2021. And we got the message on our internal chat saying, guess what? It hasn't been approved. They've actually retracted. Our partner is closing. They've not been approved. It's not going to happen.
And you're all fired.
Well, that's where it got more fun. But
that's where it got more fun.
Well, it got more fun. But I want to go into a little bit on. So they then went and said, let's go and try all these partners. So we went through another agency. I think we tried talking to Gemini, Paxos, and a whole bunch of other folks and said, can we try to bring you guys into the fold at this point in time? And I think things just got so messy, and I don't know all the details of where it went, but it didn't actually come to fruition. And so that was kind of the death knell on that project. But in between there, a little bit on the technology side. So it started out relatively permissionless, and this is like, Ethereum is the de facto of permissionless. Everybody does what they want to do there. And then you've got more permission chains, which I'm not really sure what a great example would be, but there's absolutely closed private chains that you can't access. So the idea here was that we were going to have a permission chain that would allow for visibility. You could view all the things that were happening on there, but only a certain subset of individuals would be able to actually transact on it. And even a fewer number of them would be able to publish smart contracts or applications on top of it. And it was just like, wow, we went from being like this amazing, we're going to solve all the world's problems through blockchains to, oh my gosh, we are, a database, a glorified database. And people, it really took a lot of the energy out of a lot of the engineers that got in there early because they were super stoked about this creative opportunity that we were creating. And they were kind of like just there because it's like, this is our babies. We've spent so long doing this. We can't leave it yet. But, I guess we were all kind of fortunate that, that June 2021 event actually happened. Because it inspired us to say, this doesn't necessarily need to be the end. Well, I should say us, but not necessarily me, because I'm like, well, crap, Facebook couldn't launch this. Well, who can't launch? If Facebook can't do it, who can do it? And so I went off into a tangent. I said, look, we've got Solana, we've got Ethereum, we've got Polygon, we've got NFTs. Things are really great. It was Solana summer. It's time to go and get Facebook to adopt Web3 technology for the creators. And so I got a team. We started bringing in Ethereum for Instagram. They started building some interface on top of that. We were going to make it so you could build a vibrant creator economy on top of Instagram and Facebook through NFTs, through Web3. And we got moderately far along that pathway. And the end of 2021 was coming along. My good colleague Avery, who's a CEO at Aptos, but wasn't CEO at Aptos at that point in time, he was still at Facebook. He was still chilling with me, meeting with me regularly, telling me he was so excited to bring that Diem technology to the forefront. I'm like, Avery, you've been at Facebook now for 6 more months. Why are you still here? Why don't you do something? He's like, guess what, David? I'm going to go found a company. And I'm like, are you serious, dude? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, I wish you the best of luck. And, good luck. And so, I didn't want to just wish him some good luck. And so I waited about a month, and I reached out to Avery, and I'm like, Avery, are you ready to come back and join me? I need some help over here in building out these infrastructures so they can really scale. And Avery's like, yeah, we should definitely chat, David. And so I got to him face to face, and we probably spent, I don't know, 15 hours of the next 2 days chatting, because guess what that guy shared with me? They had $200 million of investment in a pre-seed round, which it was just like,
that's a huge amount. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so just to be clear, I loved all the people I was working with in the Diem Libra era. Like the teammates, it was phenomenal. The environment was great. It was all that I had dreamed of coming to Facebook and being a part of. And it was devastating when it didn't end up happening. But I was super stoked that I got to work with.
Curious question. Because your journey when you were first talking about was really about like creating, it was just like one step further along creating more of like a decentralized ecosystem that could provide like a lot of help for XYZ reasons. And I understand we're super excited and happy working on the Libra Diem project at Facebook, but obviously Facebook is a centralized entity. So I'm curious if at all, while you were working or thinking about starting working on that project at Facebook, if there was any battle that you had internally where it's like, I'm fighting for this decentralized future for XYZ use cases. Did you have any concern at all of it coming from a centralized entity in Facebook?
I guess I kind of was so focused on trying to get something out there that I even lost this. I was disconnected from how the narrative had been changing from when we started to where it ultimately landed. And I think at that point in time, maybe it was a bit of hubris. Maybe it was just like hope and belief that if we could just get out the door, things would change. We did actually construct a lot of components to try to make it more decentralized. I think there was actually a Libra and then a Diem association. They actually had lots of partners. And so the way it was effectively constructed was Facebook was not supposed to be running it. They were supposed to just be providing engineering resources. And so that's the kind of role that I played. And so when we fundamentally looked at myself and many of my peers, we weren't being judged as how we were contributing to the outcome for Facebook, but rather the outcomes that we were going to provide for the Libra and then the Diem project. So we were actually able to really wear hats in favor of that.
Gotcha.
But fundamentally, since the decision-making process had started earlier, which was, literally David Marcus going to Congress. And so if you don't know David Marcus, he's the one that kind of kickstarted the whole Libra and Diem projects at Facebook. Okay. He went to Congress and literally told Congress, we won't launch without your approval. And so, that puts us in an interesting position where, the Libra Association and then the Diem Foundation can't move forward until they actually had that buy-in. That was part of the process that they had largely agreed to. And so, I think there was still a lot of really positive elements there, but I think the flip side is really just a lot of hope that if we could get something over the hump, we'd be able to get to that treasured land of really being permissionless and open, because it's just a natural process. Now, in retrospect, I think that was just like me with a lot of hopium. And so I am kind of happy that we hit so many bumps along the road, because it did get us to the position of where we are today, which, like I said, Avery had gotten that $200 million. My good colleagues were here. That technology that was amazing was there. And so it was like the trifecta. How often you get to work on the thing that you want to work on with the people you want to work with, and the funding that just makes it like, well, why the heck aren't you doing it? And so I gave my 2-week notice to Facebook, which was really fun because I had built a beautiful relationship with my manager at that point in time. It was probably the best relationship I've ever had with a manager. And when I shared with him the news, he then spent 30 minutes telling me how disappointed in me he was.
Really?
Because,
God.
Because, well, we had built such a strong relationship, and he's like, David, we could do everything together, and this is so surprising. How can you? What has Avery promised you? Like, this is just so unbelievable. And I was just like, I don't want to share the details with him because it's financial information, but I'm like, trust me, this could be a very life-changing opportunity, not to mention all these other things. And I kind of think he really wants to do it himself.
Sure.
I think that's the real thing. He was just really envious. He and I chatted afterwards, and he's just like, I've really just enjoyed working with you so much. It caught him by surprise because I had built up this new project with him, which is this bringing in Web3 for Facebook. It was supposed to be a huge component of the Facebook metaverse that was such a big thing. You remember that's when Facebook literally changed their name from Facebook to Meta.
Name.
The Super Bowl ad,
I was there for 1 week of Meta. It was the longest week of my life. But anyway, and so, it was really, kind of touching to get that kind of feedback. But I left. The project, fortunately that I was working on still saw the light of day. But ultimately, Facebook, as it is, needs to see outsized outcomes from their initiatives. And the reality is, as we all know, for the Facebook spaces, they're not going to be that aggressive to get that deep into it. So the project never really realized its full potential. You could see your NFTs on Facebook, you could see them on Instagram, but they never created the creator component that allowed people to go in and really do all the fun stuff that we engineered to be feasible. But so kind of bummed out for the folks that stuck it out long term and made that actually happen, but was super stoked to at least see that they got something launched.
Congratulations, I guess. Yeah. Somebody said the metaverse, that's dead. Thoughts and prayers, rip.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers.
And there's lots of fun stories I could share about the quirkiness of Facebook and how they saw that. I mean, I had random people from Facebook saying, David, you're working on my tech. I need you to start building against my tech and not doing your own thing. And I'm just like, I don't even know who you are. You're just reaching out to me out of the blue saying that this somehow fits within your program, your space. But it was, Facebook was an interesting, large, 100,000 person organization at that point in time. So it was really great heading into Aptos. And, like I said, we had this tech. It was heavily permissioned at that point in time. And, got in early February. And I'm just like, okay, guys, what is the vision? What is the direction? And they're like, all we can tell you is that we need to get to DevNet by the middle of March. And I'm just like, whoa, why? It's really important. And so we didn't really know what the purpose was, but we just spent the next month hammering on the code, removing as much of this permission stuff as possible so that we could get to a DevNet that would allow users for the first time to actually publish, move smart contracts, and start interacting with them. And the fun thing there was the night before we went to launch, we did some configuration changes on our deployment, and it resulted in really bad things happening in TM. And effectively, if somebody was trying to go in and hit the faucet, that's how you get some test net coins, so you can start doing building applications. Well, it would basically come to a crawl, and nobody was getting anything. It's like, well, we have this bizarre belief that we're going to somehow get thousands of people wanting to build on top of Aptos on day one, and so we have to make sure it's really robust. And it's not, because this configuration change that we didn't know about was hindering things. So I ended up staying up until about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, when I finally realized, or actually we thought we solved it. And I sent to bed some other guys, and I'm like, you know what? I feel really uncomfortable. I don't think we actually solved it. So I poked at it for another 30 more minutes and said, damn it, we didn't solve it. So I then spent another hour fixing it, but I didn't actually fix it because this has gotten to the space where I had very little expertise. And I broke things actually really bad, but I at least knew what the problem was. So I flagged some of our other colleagues about 6 a.m. and said, I love you guys, and I'm going to bed. Good luck.
Not ideal.
And that's what having a wonderful team that you trust to come along with you. They woke up, said, David, good call out. You figured it out. We recognize it's wrong. They fixed up all the things that I credit up. They fixed the issue that was uncovered, and we actually got back on time. We launched that day our DevNet, and it was really, really exciting. Now the little bit of share out I'll make there is what I didn't realize is what was happening 2 weeks later was another move chain was launching their DevNet, or at least launching their public facing. And that's when SWE went to GDC.
I was like, was that SWE? Yeah.
So SWE was at GDC that year, which was at the end of March, and announcing that Miston was going to not just be doing a whole bunch of random stuff to amplify Web3, but actually taking all that technology they've been building for their partners and was going to actually be launching SWE. And so it was a very strategic play to make sure that we got ahead of them and in a good position. So props to the call out there. And so what ended up transitioning from there is, we really focused on just hammering away on building out what would be the core tenets of Aptos, which is, the high performance, the accessibility, the openness, and just like the collaboration with the ecosystem. I mean, leading up to Mainnet, which was in October, I have a lot of really great memories. And so our engineering team effectively was responsible for the products, the ecosystem, the community, and everything in between. Obviously, the technology as well. And so, I remember we used to do these things called Move Mondays. We'd be on Twitter Spaces every Monday and just rambling about all the things that we've been doing for the past week. We built a community around that. People that are still building today would come in and just, chill out with us. And it was really amazing to see all that organic attention. In retrospect, we were also super naive. What we didn't realize is when you're launching a layer 1, a lot of people get really excited about airdrops.
Of course.
Oh yeah.
Well, I had my first experience in Web3. I think I bought an NFT on Polygon, so I go to NFT NYC and enter one of their things, and that was it. That was my Web3 experience prior to actually Aptos Mainnet launch. So I didn't know all about the degen craziness, and so I just thought, there's all these really nice people, and they're doing all these great things for us. So like we had at one point in time on our DevNet, I think 10,000 full nodes connected to this tiny little DevNet, and it's like, what the heck are these people doing?
Wow.
And it was, I think it was just people hoping that if they did weird stuff, they get an airdrop. And we actually, as engineers, spent a lot of time making this silly little thing robust, just in case it mattered. And it was like, at one point in time, where it's like, you know what, guys, I don't think this is actually important. We need to stop working on this. And we're going to just hit a limit and say, after this limit, people can't get connected because there's no ROI for them, and there's no ROI for us. Yeah. And, but continue on, we actually did a handful of test nets because we're like, we could probably convert this positive energy into something useful, and maybe use this for some way to recognize them after the fact. And so we had 3 test nets. We had a pretty actually no, we didn't. We started out with just allowing anybody to apply and randomly selected folks. And so for our first test net, the miracle there was we actually got to a point where the network started. The quick realization thereafter is the network didn't go very far because we allowed anybody to apply, and anybody made it to that actual test net. And so what we learned from that is we actually need to go and give people a tool that vets out that they've got legitimate hardware to be part of the test net. And so, we kind of progressed along the way, got more and more robust. And finally, by the end of our 3rd test net, a couple of fun things happened. The first one was we legitimately could identify really good partners, and we were able to actually push our test net that was globally distributed with really early test code to over 5,000 transactions per second. And this is not something that we were prepared for. We were expecting 1,000, 2,000 transactions because we didn't set a very high bar in terms of the resources, the devices that people were going to be running. And so that was what we were pre-mainnet. And it was incredible. But the other fun thing was, I talked about that bug that was our DevNet era. Well, we actually had a bug that hit us in our testnet era that was even more existential. And so we're over here, we started doing some performance tests, and all of a sudden the network would just stop. And we'd restart it, and we'd go again and try again. And it kept happening. It's like, okay, this is predictable. It's gonna happen if we get to mainnet. And so we started spending a lot of time just researching how this was going through. We had amazing logging. We had great debuggers, and we were just studying the code all over the place. And we just could not figure it out. And mind you, we spent days at this point in time. So we're like, we're even now starting to say, is it a dependency? Like, you pull in all this third-party code so you can build your applications. Is it part of the Linux kernel that we're running on top of? What could it possibly be? And so several days in, I think a couple of us started throwing out random hypotheses on what it could be. And we kind of circled back and started looking through the ways in which our system was configured. And it did actually turn out that one of our dependencies had a specific weird flag that resulted in very anomalous behavior that kind of resulted in just like the system coming to a halt. And so all we had to do is trigger that flag, and all of a sudden everything was amazing again. But through that process, multiple days with really great engineers, befuddled, and we were almost like, maybe we're not the right people to be launching a blockchain. Maybe we really need to reconsider how hard this is.
And then it just ends up being, we just have to change this thing. Here we go, it flows.
Yeah, it's a 30-second change. Holy shit, I can't believe we spent all that time getting there. But it was that, that the fact that we stuck through it, that we bonded over that I think really propelled us through what happened next, which was I think a month and a half going from there to launching Mainnet. I mean, there's one other really fun crisis where we're like, oh my gosh, Aptos might be a little expensive in terms of data usage. And so we had already launched our test net. My peers are like, we need to do this quick change. And we did this change. Actually, we had 2 test nets, or maybe 3 test nets. And we were only supposed to have 1. This is our final test net. And that's because we did some last minute changes to further optimize how people are going to be operating on top of the blockchain. And that was, another real fun one where it's like, we're just going to press the reset button again.
Sure.
So, yeah, why not? And then I got the title, David's the Cowboy Engineer of Aptos. I can probably go find that screenshot somewhere. I probably should make that my Twitter profile photo for a little while.
It should be.
Seriously, dude. Embrace it.
So we launched. It was great. I think we launched in the middle of October. Finally, all that hard work, nothing bad happened. And that, except, if you fast forward a little bit while, a good friend with some wild and crazy hair in his organization resulted in, the FTX collapse. If you don't know, FTX was an investor in Aptos, amongst many other blockchains.
When you said that, I was like, well, how am I going to know the person with the crazy hair? No, I got it. I got it. You have to...
And so, that's kind of like that was our first year. We ended the first year saying, oh my gosh, did we launch this right? What does this all mean? And it was kind of wild because we went into 2023 and a few of us went to Korea to go in and meet with one of our partner teams that was starting to build early on, and also just talk to, the folks there. And while we're in Korea, all of a sudden the coin goes from $3 to $20. And we have honestly no idea, but apparently it seems like the Korean market, for whatever reason, got really excited about Aptos. And they had this statement that 1 APT equals 1 apartment. And you probably heard the song by Rose, Apata Apata, or APT.
No.
Of course not. Nobody knows what that song is. It's not certainly #1 anywhere in the world. So, but yeah, so we all believe that these things are all interconnected. But yeah, that was kind of like the backstory of like what led into Aptos. And I think there was a...
Can you talk a little bit more about like the founding and the founders of Aptos? Because I think it's like 15 people and I might be misremembering that, but just like how that original group kind of came together.
Yeah, you mentioned Avery, and I'm just trying to figure who's in the trenches with you. Who are you texting at 6 a.m.? Have you raised the money, so do you have a team at that point, or is it just you guys on a group call? I'd like to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had Avery, Cheng, and Moshe, who were the first people to leave Facebook to go break ground and get the funding. And then we had a bunch of really great engineers, which I'm gonna screw up by not being able to name them all, but some of the ones that come to the forefront of my mind right now is you've got Sherry Shao, you've got Zakun Lee, you've got Joshua Lind, Greg Nazario, Max Kaplan. Trying to circle through my mind there. We had some great researchers. We had Sasha and Rati come along. They were actually really early. And of course, Alden, who, he's actually an infrastructure engineer, but I really love to give him problems that were much more user facing. So I always called my favorite ecosystem engineer, and he absolutely hated it. But, the man did amazing things to help make Aptos one of the cheapest blockchains on the network. And, we've added a lot of people after that, but that was kind of like the core team that really got us kickstarted. Avery brought in a couple of folks from his network. We had, here we go. Perfect.
Just had to give the assist on the screen share here because it's a lot of names, man.
Yeah, so I mean, you see Satal Kedia there. Aline also joined us. Jake, who came in from God knows where, but he's been an amazing blessing, as well as Rusty. Yeah, so that's the whole team right there. And so, just seeing all these people come together and, just to give you clarity, that 6 a.m. call was to my good friends, Sherry and Rusty. And, Rusty had kind of had a lot of fun with me up to that point in time, because every single time I would get involved with these production engineering issues, you can see Sherry and Rusty are production engineers. I would always say, oops, I screwed up again, guys. And they're like, David, can you just please ask us for help next time you want to do something?
Just stop touching things.
Yes, I'm like, of course. And I never did. I always just kept breaking things, and I learned a little bit along the way. But it was really great that I had such great partners out there that would kind of just come in and cover our asses wherever we needed to. And that was the robustness of what made Aptos great. Is everybody was so good at recognizing the problems that they could uniquely solve, and just going and doing that, and then coming back. And so we did actually set up some pretty good get to markets, or GTMs, for the DevNet and for the testnet, and then just went crazy on that. And I think the hardest part, though, and it goes back to the engineering thing, is as engineers, we can believe what we know it is perfection. And whenever you're trying to get to a product to market, it's all about being able to recognize what is good enough. And so we really had to wrestle with our internal demons about saying, we can be 10 times better than we are right now, but we could also ship 10 years from now. And so I remember we actually got into a room, and we were making the decision: do we launch in late September, early October, or do we wait until December, January? And Alden, who I like to tease a lot because he's such a great guy, is like, I just say we ship 6 months from now, because 1 month, 2 months isn't enough, but 6 months will give me a lot more confidence. I'm like, okay, that's a vote for shipping now. And so that's kind of how we went. We all recognize that we can all be much more perfect than we are now, but it's just so important to actually get it out there, to get the developers to actually give you feedback, to start growing that ecosystem and all these pieces. And honestly, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, how the engineers were a lot of what was the community and the ecosystem building. And this is kind of like one of the pain points for Aptos, is that when we started, we didn't have a robust ecosystem team, which is so common in Web3. Like, sure. I would actually argue, if you don't hire your ecosystem growth kind of initiatives really early on, it becomes really hard. And we didn't. And so I don't even know if Aptos gave out a grant to ecosystem builders until after FTX, after things went sideways. Yeah. And so all those projects that came into Aptos were coming in with the mentality of what had largely happened in Solana, which is you build, people get excited about it, and liquidity just starts flowing in. But that's not the reality that we ended up in.
And then you start using customer funds to buy properties in the Cayman Islands, and that's just what happens.
I was waiting for that opportunity. It never came.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of our early ecosystem projects actually end up bellying up because we didn't realize how important it was for that type of support. We were just like, we're going to give you the best damn technology and opportunity to build on top of Aptos. And so there's been so many lessons since then, so much more re-emphasis and effort. And so just going into this year, we've really made a very conscious and mental model of 10x ecosystem. You can see it all over Twitter. You can see it all over our posts on Medium and wherever else we're making communications, wherever we make presentations. It's always about 10x ecosystem. And that takes a lot of different shapes and sizes. But I think the most prominent one is Ash, who's our head of ecosystem, said we are going to do a $200 million fund for ecosystem initiatives. And so that means projects that are building on top of Aptos, projects that are already live, things that are going to be bringing value to consumers, users, and whatever, are going to have this massive liquidity backing them. And I'm going to leave that for you folks to figure out what that means. But that's from the vibes I was getting on crypto Twitter. That was major alpha to really believe Aptos is changing the trajectory and the direction.
Man, I really appreciate the thorough but concise rundown because it gives us a good picture. You guys have been building for a long time.
Yes.
And there are a lot of companies in our space who have been building for a long time but don't have the proof in the pudding to show for it. They don't have the stablecoin volume. They don't have the TVL. They don't have the mind share. And they don't have really the infrastructure. And I would really kind of like you to explain a little more, if you wouldn't mind. We've talked about the move language.
Yeah.
And I understand that this is potentially something that's kind of revolutionary in the sense that it is a built for blockchain programming language, as opposed to one that has been used for it, like Solidity or Rust after the fact. Can you speak a little to our audience about your experience building there and just why you guys have built the way you have, how that has helped set you up for this ambitious plan to scale?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So if we kind of roll back, so the decision here, we go back to, again, 2018. So Rust, I don't even think that was really a concept at that point in time. It was really Solidity. I think Viper was big back in those days. That's another EVM, Ethereum programming language. And we're just looking at these, and we're so familiar with all the bad things that can happen in that space. Whether, I think there are stories of assets getting liquidated because somebody left some weird double spend opportunities, which then allows you to just infinitely pull out assets. Or even worse, I've heard stories of user funds getting locked, and there's absolutely no way to extract them because you've got a bug in your contract. You can insert, but you can't extract. And so, these are all constraints that we've seen and we heard. And it does go back to the fact that these languages are kind of extracted from like things like TypeScript or Python, and then said, let's try to make them kind of work for Web3. But Web3 has a lot of nuances because you're effectively developing this like decentralized distributed system of all these interactive applications, which is what, the blockchain is. And so Move comes into the space to say, you know what, we're going to recognize that we need better primitives. And so the primitive that I really love most about Move is the idea that there is actual like a
when you say primitive, what do you mean?
Like a core tenant, a property, something that is innate to the language itself, how you express yourself as a developer.
Okay.
And so you can kind of just think about in a traditional program, like if you're going to be really trivial, if I want to move money from say Alex to Will, I'm going to just use an integer. I'm going to say Alex, Will, 5. And that's going to move 5 coins over, and it's going to literally just subtract 5 from Alex's balance and add 5 to Will's balance. But if something weird happens along the way, I'm writing my contract out to do this, and I don't actually do a +5 to Will, and I publish this and I run through it, I'll always extract out 5 from Alex, but I'll never give that to Will. And now I've just lost 5 units every single time I call this operation. Yeah. And what that effectively means is there's no conservation. That primitive doesn't exist. The primitive is I can add and I can subtract, numbers, but I can't do more than that. And so what Move did was actually bring the concept of resource conservation. And so instead of going to Alex's account and just subtracting 5, I'm literally saying Alex has, hundreds or thousands. Alex is a probably rich guy. I see his background, looks really nice. So
you should see his magic card collection.
Yeah.
It's all in magic cards.
It's all in magic cards.
Perfect. And so, rather than just extracting this random number of 5, I am literally taking 5 units of, Alex's magic cards, assuming that, the fungible asset, and I'm going to take that out of his account. Now, if for whatever reason I have a bad bug, well, I literally have 5 units of his cards, and they need to go somewhere. So effectively, this would not even pass a compiler. The Move compiler would literally say, you have bad code. Go fix it. You can't just take 5 units of Alex's and let it disappear. And so I have to explicitly take it from Alex, and I have to explicitly give it to Will. And so this flow allows for conservation of resources, which is really, really powerful because it eliminates a whole swath of potential issues, such as, losing assets or, potential, double spending, or allowing people to potentially take an asset for nothing, like where I could, give Alex 5 of something and then continuously just extract a whole bunch of other stuff out of him, thinking that he got more than just 5. And so that is something I really love. Now, the other component, which kind of builds on top of this, is instead of talking in these lower level concepts of like just bare numbers, we're literally talking about this advanced concept of this data structure, this very visible, what do you want to call it, assets. We're literally taking this asset in a way that developers can say that is an asset and not just a handful of numbers. And so as a developer, when you look at this, you're able to much more say, I can rationalize what is happening in my application flow. And so what that means is security is substantially improved. We're moving away from large complex applications, which is the case of Solidity, to concise and very clear applications, which is Move. And this was just my hypothesis. And so, I actually talked to a lot of our auditors in this space, and I said, tell me. I didn't see them. I said, you guys got to tell me, what is the advantage of Move? Is there really an advantage, or do you actually find it really painful? And they're like, dude, we save so much time in Move auditing because it's so readable, it's so accessible, and oftentimes it's mostly just coaching folks on how to avoid, common mistakes that might happen within any sort of domain. And so it was just really, really great to get that affirmation. And the fun thing is, and actually this isn't the fun thing, this is actually a frustrating thing. You get people that have developed in these legacy languages, and they come into Move, and they're so broken. It's like they got beaten bad. And that trauma is so hard to shake from them that they just ask a lot of weird questions. And it took me a long time, because I didn't have that the development experience in Solidity. And they would just ask me all these weird questions. I'm like, I don't understand your question. That doesn't seem relevant.
So this is the language piece is something that I'm particularly interested in, because we had done a little bit of work with Movement Labs, which obviously uses a lot of what you guys have built. And
they actually have Aptos Coin as their main token on chain.
We learned that.
I mean, even just digging through like their GitHub, it's I mean, your guys' stuff is in every single piece. I mean, even to begin doing anything over there, the first thing my dad noted when he was starting to experiment with it, because he had never used Move before, was just like, I'm over here just downloading all of Aptos's stuff in order to even do anything. And he was context, my father is a software engineer and has been working in that industry for an extremely long time. The joke Evan had at the beginning about knowing my parents is they both got their PhDs at Yale as well. And they were in the music theory department, but my dad was always working in computer science at the same time. And I know that he had done languages are one of his like big interests, and had been a C guy from the beginning of C back in starting to dabble in the mid 70s, and then has been working with that in some iteration of it for a very long time. Aware of blockchain, did like light messing with Solidity and stuff. And that was kind of the first thing he said about Move as a language, was just that it makes programming there feel a little bit more natural. And he was really going off. I have pages of like notes from his like excited ramblings about you mentioned just about like the way that Move treats resources. He said specifically resources treated as first-class citizens, making it easier to be more efficient with code, slimming the margin of error down for mistakes, just because everything gets to be more efficient, as being one of his big interest points. He had recently come off of starting to experiment with Rust, and just noted a lot of similarities, with the core difference being that Rust had to have been retrofitted to do blockchain stuff, whereas Move was built with that eventuality in mind from the get-go. Just again, laser focusing in on that idea of efficiency. The first couple things that I wrote down after hearing about that was like, as we talk about different niches that are really exciting, it feels like this is something that makes more sense for real world assets as a narrative, just because security and efficiency feels like it would be way more important as people start talking about how much of their own property they could move on chain. We were talking about like their house or stuff like that. And I was curious if you had any thoughts about that from the language perspective, just because it was one of the first places my mind went when I thought about like, why would I care so much about language getting more and more and more efficient, thus less prone to errors or exploits or oversights?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a great topic, and I don't know how deep we want to get into the tech side of things. It's really easy to do that, because I was actually
dive in and we can pull you out if we need to.
Okay, so I was the one that came up with the original cryptocurrency or coin standard in Aptos, and then I was the one that came up with the fungible asset standard that largely replaced it. And there was a lot of growing pains, and I've got a lot of feedback from a lot of people, maybe even some hate mail along the way for all different directions. But when we built out the original cryptocurrency, the coin standard on there, our goal was to say we want this to be used ubiquitously, however you want. And I actually got on a call right before Mainnet launched with friends from Layer Zero. And they're like, David, we love your code, we love your standard, but you've invented cash on chain. And when you go talk to real world asset providers, stablecoin providers, they're going to freak out and they're going to say, that's not possible. I said, I think we'll be able to massage them otherwise. Let's just get there. He's like, I wish you the best of luck, and let's see what happens. And so, I didn't really know what I was saying at that point in time. I was just, really going on. We got to get to mainnet. We'll figure out all these details later. You know, there's infinitely many problems to solve. And you know, you've seen Ethereum; they've evolved over time. Solana has also evolved over time. Aptos can evolve over time. But
Sure,
you know, they did not tell you how hard evolution over time is, which is why I get the hate mail. And so, you know, we started talking more to the stablecoin providers and even some of the real world asset providers. We just started doing research, and we realized there are certain properties of cash that are really, really dangerous. And so just to be clear, what cash effectively allows you to do is you can move cash in and out of circulation by just holding it to the side for a very long time. And if you eliminate serial numbers, which cash has serial numbers, but on chain, you eliminate serial numbers. Each unit of fungible asset on chain is not serialized. So you can't actually tell who or where it is. And so I could literally take a coin and put it into a place that nobody could actually monitor. And so if you think about a real world asset provider, they have to be fully accountable for all their assets on chain. And we effectively made something that allowed people to say, haha, you can't touch it. And if you go to like concretely, when you looked at Tornado Cash on Ethereum, when they did their thing, all the accounts there got blocked. They were not allowed to interact with any, I think at least USDC transactions thereafter, because Circle was told, go freeze those accounts. So all those assets were now locked. Well, guess what? If they did that on Aptos, they could try to lock the accounts. We actually did have that functionality, but it doesn't lock the accounts. It just locks a very well-defined place where you can store coins. But I can create my arbitrary place that I store my USDC. And that can't ever be frozen because Circle doesn't have permissions over it. And so, you know, that's the beauty of what we created. We created this thing that just allowed for your money to go anywhere, which is powerful if you're building a DeFi application, because you literally want to put your money in the DeFi application.
right.
And you don't want to just like denote in a table, which is how Solidity does it, that your DeFi application is managing it and all this stuff is happening behind the scenes. You can't really make sense of it. Move made it really powerful. So you can literally say the DeFi application owns that asset and it's on my behalf. And that's why our folks loved it so much. But we recognize we really need to shift towards the real world assets. And so I think it's AIP 21, where we really just opined on how important it is to have this fully global access available to currencies and coins. And not does it just make it better for regulators and these folks that have these stringent properties that they need to maintain. The other thing is, it means that you can't just put assets in arbitrary places that make it really hard to find, which is actually another funny story because early on, our NFT standard was kind of built originally like this as well. We have two NFT standards and two cryptocurrency standards because of this, because we moved away from just this arbitrary place it anywhere to globally accessible is really important. We had an NFT projects come. So these guys have been building on Aptos now for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, because this is January 2023. And one of these founders comes out and says, oh my God, I lost my NFT. And he can't find anywhere. And you know, if you think about Ethereum, well, in Ethereum, all you do is you go say, what NFT was it? We'll see who the current owner is. Oh, that's where it is. Super easy. Solana has a very similar kind of concept. Well, in Aptos, you can just shove an NFT anywhere you want. It can be anywhere in memory. You'll never find it again unless if you scan every single thing in memory, which is not very practical, not very feasible problem. Yes. And so, you know, fortunately, he eventually found it. It was just in another one of his wallets. He just screwed up. But, you know, the Aptos technology literally allowed you to go do random wild stuff that was very hard to go and track down. And so, you know, we looked at that and we looked at where we wanted to be with our fungible assets, and we're like, okay, real world asset providers need this. So we built it out. And you know, the really exciting thing about that was we had some random guy in Thailand who has been watching our AIPs, our Aptos improvement protocols, and he saw this proposals and he saw it come out and he's like, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. And so this was the founder of Props or PropBase, the first fungible asset, a real world asset provider on top of Aptos. And you can actually go in, you can KYC and start buying shares of property in Thailand on Aptos.
Wow. And how long has this been up?
I think PropBase probably launched sometime in 2023. Wow. So the technology was largely available. Gosh, I'm trying to do it. I think we had the ideas originally wrapped up in April timeframe. I think they finally got to mainnet in October or so, maybe a little bit earlier. And so I think this guy had been, you can see right there, he was part of Aptos since inception, but he was waiting for that single piece of technology to come about so that he could actually legitimately build RWAs on there. And so, you know, that was kind of like really rewarding because we had this hypothesis and we believed we needed to do it. And we didn't necessarily have the stablecoin providers in the exact position where they were telling us what their comfort level was. So we built this all out kind of like in a silo, just with faith. And then, you know, we finally landed the partnerships with Tether and then Circle. And then, you know, later in 2023 or 2024, they finally landed. But it was a long battle to get to those points where we got the native stables on there that showed that. And then at the same time, we saw a whole bunch of RWA providers come on, you know, a large bunch of folks like Securitize who helped BlackRock get on. I think they've also enabled other folks to get on. More recently, we saw the Pact token come over, and now we've got apparently billions of dollars worth of loans on top of Aptos, and I think almost hundreds of millions of dollars worth. I'm not sure how this all works out, but hundreds of millions of dollars of RWAs according to RWXYZ, but a ton of loans being done. And it's been huge technology barriers have been eliminated and enabling folks that are in, you know, I think the Pact token is a great example, and I'm going to butcher it, but I think it effectively allows for folks to do lots of micro loans to folks in developing countries and get, you know, assets quickly, availably, and to pay back really efficiently. And, you know, the benefit is we can do this all on Aptos at light speed, but also with almost negligible costs. So just to do like a loan on Aptos is a fraction of a cent. You will find another blockchain that you can do such complex operations for so cheap and do it so fast at the same time.
Yeah. Now, everything you're saying is an answer to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which was, why do you think that Aptos? Oh, no, it's totally fine. But like, the question is for everybody listening, if you go on DeFi Llama, site we talk about all the time, you can go and you can measure the amount of money being put on chain called TVL. It's not a perfect gauge, but it's the best thing that we got to measure total value locked or money going on chain. And since Bitcoin's been correcting in January, altcoins have been correcting then too. Typically when markets are red, you tend not to see the amount of TVL going up for a chain. And Evan is sharing it now on his screen. If you pull up APT instead of USD, Evan, right now
yeah. How about just market cap?
Nope, right down to the right.
Whoop.
Nope,
oh, I see
left.
what you want.
Yep, there you go.
Man, too many buttons, DeFi Llama. Let's go for it.
Because the thing is when you measure the amount of the native token being put on this network, it's very impressive. So, David, I'm curious. Everything that you've been talking about are all valid reasons. The addition of multiple stablecoins, the addition of Securitize, the addition and expansion of real-world asset plays, and more people just coming on and building on Aptos. But do you have anything else that can explain why you have been so successful at continuing to get people to come on and bring APT on chain at a time when markets have been red? Because that is a very rare thing. I've been watching DeFi Llama for years now, and this tends to not happen.
Well, I mean, just to be clear, I'm on the engineering side, so I can't necessarily coordinate it back to how it works in other ecosystems. I can just say we've done a lot of concerted efforts to really build out the right flywheels in our ecosystem. And this is something that I have actually had a lot of opportunity to get deep in the weeds with. You know, like I said, we didn't have a robust ecosystem team. It's been a blessing for me that I've actually had an opportunity to go out to a lot of different ecosystem ventures, get to meet a lot of our founders, get to understand their pain points and what excites them and what success means for them. And so in particular, I think it was, I guess it would be July 2023. I went to Vietnam for the first time, and I had no idea what I was entering. I went with one of my good colleagues there, Kevin, and he was also a very early Aptos guy. He was the one that had to suffer through all my crazy ideas in the Move language. Bless his soul, I can't believe he's still around. And so, you know, we're there in Vietnam. He's Vietnamese, which was part of the big reason why he was there and very helpful. And he just brought up these random people. And he brought up this one gentleman that he had been friends with back when they were at Google together. And this amazing, energetic guy, his name is Patrick Wen, came up and just started saying, you guys are building cool tech. What's going on Aptos? What can we tap into? And I'm like, well, like right now, the only thing you can do with APT is do this delegated staking, and it's pretty boring. Like that doesn't enable you to engage with inside of the DeFi space. It's very trivial, and we do actually have a pretty high rewards rate on Aptos. It's right now roughly 7%. If you delegate or if you stake APT, you get roughly a 7% return on that. Now, but that doesn't allow you to then go do additional fun stuff. He's like, you know what? You guys need liquid staking protocols. And I said, tell me more, my friend. He's like, effectively with a liquid staking protocol, you convert your APT into a liquid staked form of APT, and you can actually take it to other protocols for various fun purposes. And so, just kind of shortcut. Well, I'll tell the story, then we'll tell you what you can do with it on Aptos. So he built out a team called Amnes, and within, I want to say maybe 3 months, I think it was probably September timeframe, maybe October timeframe of 2023, they launched the first liquid staking protocol on top of Aptos. And it was a game changer because we're able to now go and get all this APT, and it's like, okay, cool. Now I've got all this STAPT, which is the Amnes staked or liquid staked APT. What do I want to do with this? Well, you got great protocols, borrow lend protocols like Aries, who allow you to deposit it there. And then you're like, well, what do I do after I deposit? Well, I borrow some other asset, and I go get yield on top of that. And so for the first time in my small lifetime of Web3 degeneration, I said, oh my gosh, I can do this thing called looping, which is I deposit my STAPT, I borrow APT, I create more STAPT, I lend my STAPT, borrow more APT, and I create this loop where my APR, my 7%, can quickly go to well over 50%.
Right.
And
what could go wrong?
Nothing went wrong. Nothing wrong. I'm very happy. But what went right was other protocols got involved. And so now on Aptos, you can actually roughly find a lot of other things. Like you've got Jewel Finance, Echelon, Superposition, all providing opportunities to do this kind of looping. But what was the real game changer, even Meso Finance, like all these great folks, is Vibrant X opened the doors to the masses to make it amazing and easy. So what Vibrant X is basically they offer you a view into all the things you can do on Aptos. Well, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of things you can do on Aptos and make it really easy. So instead of having to construct your own loops, like, this multiple steps and all that pain, they literally allow you to say, here's the amount of APT I have, here's the multiplier, how many times I want to create loops, and here's going to be the effective outcome that I would get from that. And they also provide a seamless way of extracting it when you're done. And so, like, we're starting to see all the pieces that make it really easy for anybody that's looking to make relatively safe gains on top of Aptos without doing anything crazy. Now, the other fun thing, and I don't know how much of this is incentivized versus just organic, but you can do the same thing with stables on Aptos. And so there's two variants of that. The first one is you go to Petra, which is our wallet, and you download the mobile version. We've got this thing called Petra Earn. And you can easily go right now to Coinbase, get USDC, transfer it over to Aptos for a fraction of a cent. I think it's like 11 cents on Coinbase. And you can start getting roughly, I think it's 10% APR on your USDC by bringing it over to Aptos and going to the Earn program. And that's built on top of Aries, which is that's actually a Genesis protocol in Aptos. It's been here since pre-Mainnet, very trustworthy, very reliable, and great partners that they partnered up with the Petra team to actually bring that out to early folks in the space. Mm-hmm. So that's the easy one. But you want to get degen, where you can actually deposit your USDC, borrow USDT, and loop it into another account where then you're depositing USDT and borrowing USDC and bringing it back to the first account. And so I got a lot of colleagues that have done a lot of deranged, wild things, and I think VibrantX actually supports this one as well. So that, as a user that doesn't want to get like too wild into the details and understanding the nuances of these, they tell you the high level details about what your ROI is going to be from getting engaged in that space. And it's just great to see that we've got all these great, amazing builders that are really identifying the gaps. And then you go on Twitter and you see that there's a really engaged environment there of people kind of sharing that alpha on a regular basis on ways in which you can. And I think I've even got a handful of folks that will go and say, here are the positions I'm running on Aptos, and just give you, here's what the ROI is over time. And I'm probably saying a bunch of stuff I probably shouldn't say, but this is all stuff that's viable on the internet, and this is not financial advice, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. So what's the next thing, talking about like all these like degen things, safe things to do, as well as kind of like how the DeFi environment kind of developed, in your opinion, and probably what you're building right now, like what are the next things that you think Aptos needs?
Well, I think it's still been a long journey because, going into 2024, the big initiative there was a lot of enterprise and institutional building. That's why we are in the top tier. We're either 3 or 4 on RWXYZ because we just have that many real world assets on chain. And that's really great because that creates more attraction, more opportunity for value flow. Now, what we need to do is translate that into what that means for ecosystem. And so heading into this year, one of the challenges we've gotten a lot of feedback from our ecosystem protocols is Aptos it's still nascent. It's still early on to where there's too much for them to learn. And, we don't have the broad wallets that you might know from your Ethereum or your Solana space. And so it is a journey for people that actually get into Aptos the first time. And it's a journey to get into Web3 for the first time. But there's a ton of documentation out there on Ethereum, a ton of documentation there on Solana. But you go to Aptos, and I'll be frank, I went and I just Googled what are the top wallets on Aptos recently, and we got Aptos. The number one wallet hasn't been touched in 2 years. How can that be the number one wallet? It's because there's not a massive amount of documentation getting updated in the space, and I think that's one area where we've got this big effort from Poan, who's our new head of community, who's going to be really focused on leveraging our collective to go in and just educate everybody. I want everybody to know how they can ape in to Aptos. But that's not the technical side. I think on the technical side, we've got the fastest blockchain out there. We've got the highest throughput blockchain out there. We've got proof that we can do 30,000 transactions and maintain sub-second finality time. There's no other blockchain that has actually demonstrated this in real world environments. I think the closest you'll see, you can go to Artemis and look at total transactions in a day. We are an order of magnitude more than any other blockchain out there. I think Solana and Sui got roughly 50 mil. We're at almost 400 million. And so that's just like, that is the robustness of Aptos. And actually what we learned in that process is at a certain point in time, it's not the blockchain that's the limiter. It's the fact that when people are building on top of a blockchain, they have certain expectations of how powerful it's going to be. And so we were actually overwhelming our ecosystem indexers and services on the dates that that massive amount of transactions hit. We got feedback from Coinbase that transactions were delayed up to 2 hours because they were so far behind in processing the volume of stuff that was happening on chain. And so it's really interesting as you kind of scale to the extremes of what blockchain technology, especially Aptos technology, is possible to what it means for the entirety of this broad ecosystem in which we're a part of. And so, it's exciting, it's scary, but we at least know that the Aptos blockchain will not be the reason why people can't get access to this technology. It's going to be all the stuff on the side, which means we have a lot of work to do in that space. But
so what's the solution to that then? Is it is it the bridge between Web3 to Web2 tech, or is it that Web2 tech needs to be able to scale up now, which is kind of a funny scenario, like the tables have flipped. Is it like Web2 infrastructure needs to be able to scale up now at a company like a Coinbase to be able to handle the throughput and technical broadband of Aptos now?
It's a really hard, I actually argue it's more in the research space, because we've been targeting this internally. So at Aptos, we've built out the indexers just to help get the ecosystem ahead. And so we kind of think of the blockchain technology as not just the core thing that's doing consensus, move, and all that stuff. We actually say it's got to be all the way to the end user. And so we've been able to push our own indexers, I think, to roughly 10 to 15,000 transactions per second. And this is like I wouldn't say it's even a naive approach. It's actually really robust. We probably put in years of engineering mind thought and mind power into building this really high performing thing. You won't find an indexer this powerful out there. And so what the Coinbase folks did is they went with a bit more naive process. It's not as robust as what we're doing, not as scalable, but it actually becomes more of a research problem of how do you make this engine, this fire hose of data scale. And so, if you look at things like what Twitter and Facebook are doing, their data sets really work well for, this kind of scaling up because they've got billions of users. But a blockchain is more about, I want to be able to do anything, everything all at the same time. And so the nuances there get a lot more difficult on how do you actually, what primitives, what goals, what are your goals in that? And I think ultimately where we're landing is that we have to be opinionated in how we want to look at the data and how we want other people to look at the data. And that's been kind of the pain point that we've been facing is, we build all these really cool things on chain, but once you move to off chain and you want to build applications on top of it, you kind of have to think a little bit differently about what are you actually building there, because it can't be done naively at tens or hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. So honestly, the real fun thing is, there's a lot of on Twitter about like 10, 100, a million, a billion, infinite transactions per second.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's really thinking about the real problem, which is, cool, you can do all this, but can anybody actually make sense of it? Like you look at Visa, which I think supports tens of thousands of transactions per second, but Visa's trivial. It's a handful of numbers being processed really, really quickly. That's not what a blockchain does. A blockchain is literally executing complex code in a very secure and verifiable way across, either somewhere between hundreds to thousands of different machines all at the same time, and coming to an agreement that that's actually what happened. And that's what's happening at the blockchain layer. So you even think that tens of thousands is incredible, but then you move it to the far ends and you look at the data that you're pushing out there. So let's just say we're going to talk about, Alex giving Will 5 magic cards. The actual data that you get out of that, sorry, dude, I tried.
I'm more interested in Pokemon cards anyway, so it's fine.
That's where the real money is. Got to
Exactly.
catch them all, or catch them all. But effectively, you're dumping out in that simple transaction. I would say you're roughly talking about a kilobyte or 2 of data. And so when you pump that out, you're talking about megabytes, hundreds of megabytes of data in a single block. But we're trying to process upwards of 5-10 blocks per second. And so the data demands of actually understanding what that data means, not just reading that data, but understanding it is just massive. And how do you then put that data into databases, make sense of it so somebody can query into it? Like where that is, to me, where we're going to see a lot of the real hard problems that need to be solved in the blockchain space over the next 5 to 10 years, especially when we talk about transitioning from the trivial things like the store of value, which is Bitcoin, but to the actual programmable money, which is what Move is trying to be. And how do we do that? I'm excited about that, and I think that's tangential to the actual question you asked about what this next year is going to be. But that is something that's on my mind, and I think there was a follow up there, so I'll pause.
Yeah, I just wanted to drill into that for a second, because I can tell when you talk about this part of it, I can tell that you're nerding out pretty hard about it, just because it's a good thing, because we never differentiate. We never talk about the difference here. We talk about it a little bit sometimes as we're comparing, current gas fees on Ethereum, different kinds of transactions, and how, the calculation being done to process an NFT mint is very different from swapping ETH from one wallet to another. It's a different set of calculations that happen. So of course these things get treated differently. I'm curious, if I ask you to take the engineer hat off for a second, and we look at TPS, or the amount of transactions that can be processed at one time, and let's just keep it simple and say we're talking about standard swaps, as if you were using this for payment rails, and it was how many people could be paying for things on a day-to-day basis, in regular everyday life, not wanting to stand at the cash register and wait for 10 minutes for a transaction to clear. At what point at what point is it good enough before we don't necessarily need to worry too much about how many truly can we squeak out? At what point are we chasing it for the sake of chasing it and getting that high TPS versus putting the effort into making sure that there are, like you were kind of alluding to earlier, enough things to do, enough reasons for people to want to process high amounts of transactions at once, to pay for things or to just interact with each other in all of the different ways, that you guys want people to be using Aptos.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I don't think there's really going to be the perfect answer, but I think we can have a little bit of fun here.
No, you just go, it's 97,462 TPS, Alex. That's it. Exactly.
Perfect. But I mean, let's take Super Bowl, for instance. So when Super Bowl happens, I think it is Super Bowl, Facebook actually is known to have issues. Or maybe it's New Year's, I can't remember. Either way, let's go with New Year's. It's probably the more accurate one. New Year's, I remember every year we'd have this concern that somehow Facebook servers are going to melt. And they often did. They would reprioritize everything to just get ready for that, because that's the peak volume. And so, 99% of the time, you're not at peak volume. Is the Visa network always processing 50,000 transactions? Is Trump Coin launching every day and taking down Solana? No, these don't happen all the time, but we do build services not for the average use case, but for the extreme use case that's going to make or break what you're building there. And so I don't know what's really going to be the upper bound. I will agree, like right now, like block space is highly available, and therefore that does help a lot with fees. That's why Aptos is so cheap. That's why even Ethereum these days is looking much more cost effective, because people have moved their traffic to other blockchains, because block space is very available, very much a commodity. And so I think that is why a lot of our effort going into this year across all the engineering organization is really shifting away from let's make the blockchain a little bit faster, or because I think the most recent post is we actually got down to 150 milliseconds for a block time, which is I think we're already like 50% or 100% faster than anybody else. So it's just like we're half of the next competitor. And so you just look at that and you're like, okay, cool, that is amazing. But now let's go really target applications that we think matter the most. And you're going to see a change in trajectory. We're going to be sharing out our roadmap, I think, within the next day or two. And there's some really exciting things on there about what that means in terms of, platformization. I will say the one thing that there's already a little bit of alpha leak, so I'm not going to be sharing anything more, but we're going to be focused on trading. We want trading to happen on Aptos in volume in ways that have never been done before. And so that means we're not going to just be providing some move contract that does a little bit. We're going to go into the core of the actual blockchain itself and say we can build a general purpose blockchain that actually is really favorable for trading engines. And that means anybody that wants to build a trading platform on top of Aptos is going to have something that's going to be equivalent of, or even better than, Hyperliquid. And we're going to make sure that Aptos is the place that's going to be the greatest thing to happen. And I think, along that path, the other thing that just has to happen is, by bringing in this 10x ecosystem, which, another component is how do we bring in assets from other chains? So that we want to make sure that if you're a MetaMask user on whatever blockchain, or a Phantom user on whatever blockchain, Aptos is super easy to use. You've got the CCTP, which allows USDC to seamlessly transfer between chains. We will make it so you never have to download an Aptos wallet, but you will be seamlessly doing DeFi or whatever you want on Aptos. That is the vision, that is the hope. We are ambitiously going to work with our ecosystem protocols to make sure that they have the right marketing and supports, and apparently $200 million worth of whatever is needed to get them to rocking, so that we can bring all those people from outside of Aptos into Aptos and make it, what I really want to see is, I got to experience Robinhood when I took my fraternity leave. I started out losing a lot of money because, God damn it, it's so easy to do it. But after I realized it's, you
just wait until you start using 101x leverage.
Oh God, yeah. You should go check out Merkle Trade. They at one point in time had 1,000x leverage, and I think they rolled that back down to 150x leverage just because of risk associated with that. Yeah, I'm really excited about what's going on in the space, and I see Robinhood as the North Star in terms of just user accessibility, because we really need
certainly so in that category, yeah,
that opportunity, and that's the only way Web3 is going to come at the forefront, and so I'm bullish about what we're doing there, just because we've identified the titans in the retail industry. And I think we've got the right perspective of how to go in and tackle these problems.
On that, Evan, I just wrote it. Well, Evan, you're muted.
I was just doing an impersonation of a guy with a ventriloquist dummy, and
you did great.
Gotcha. I was just trying to.
Wonderful. I'd give you a ding for that.
You go ahead. I'm just trying to.
No, yeah, David, I wanted your opinion on expanding a little bit the conversation away just from Aptos right now, and also like, what do you think is the biggest challenge or problem, whichever way you want to call it, in just like Web3 in general, of being able to get like the masses on chain? Is it an engineering product problem? Is it a marketing go-to-market problem? Is it a ease of use problem? Something else? Regulations? And anything in there?
I mean, I think we can pull a bunch of different things. So I'll give you a handful of responses. I think from the regulatory front, it's always been problematic. I think the new folks in power are potentially going to make that a little bit easier. But you never know, because every day we get new things that create wild changes to our macro. I think the other one would be, right now the product is largely DeFi. It's I hate to say it, but that it's not too far away from gambling. I mean, there's definitely ways in which you can make investments. I'm excited about a lot more of real-world assets getting on chain and us being able to actually make investments in tangible goods. That we can actually say, like, the price of housing went up, I've got my assets on chain, that's great, versus many derivatives therefrom. So I think that's going to be a great opportunity as we hit that boundary. I think the other one is, I think if you look at a blockchain itself, it's not being used the way that I think it really goes to. And it goes back to my time in my PhD, and I'm like, what would have been really great when we're building out these decentralized networks? What if we just had a common communication plane? We always knew where anybody was, wherever they are, and we know how to reach them. Well, if you think about it, a blockchain kind of allows that. Like, we all have dedicated blockchain addresses. We can all post messages to each other. Why aren't we building applications that seamlessly allow for that to be taken advantage of? And so I'm pretty damn bullish about what could this mean in terms of just like ownership. Like, I'm going to go pick on Facebook here briefly. So Facebook is all about ads. Almost all of Web2 is all about ads. And that's basically you selling yourself so that you can get some smidge of a viable resource in return. But if you think about it, if you go to Facebook, what would you say, you'd pay to use Facebook? A couple of bucks a month, maybe?
I don't know. Probably $20 a month, depending on how you use it.
You're worth so much more to Facebook than that. Think about it. Facebook revenue is off the charts. And so they're not giving you any of that. They're just giving you this low quality good. And you're like, well, this kind of sucks, because right now I go to Facebook and like 95% of it is just clickbait or ads. Imagine that you could go to Facebook with your Web3 identity and say, actually, I own all my data, because we're building out all these data models, this AI, these decentralized components, and you can get access to that, but you're not going to actually get access to my data. You're going to get access to Ask Me Questions, which is effectively how the big data models work and AI works. And so I'll let you give me an ad, but you're going to give me money so you can render me that ad. And now you're able to actually protect your identity, get paid for that, and still get that access to Facebook all along the way. So you're changing the approach, and you're securing your data. And I think if we can get to that, I think it's going to be really, really powerful. And not just that, but you can also think about the fact that the ads quality could probably go up a lot better, because now you are the hub of who you are, rather than the 10 or 30 or different whatever entities that are trying to scrape data on you so they can give you a really crappy ad about, buying a new microwave.
Right. White guy who lives in the United States makes $50,000. Let's show him baseball.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you answered a question. We had a great question came in that was like, an expansion off of, what does the industry really need? What's the biggest problem? And the question was, well, what's the biggest problem that people have that this could solve as to why they should get involved? And that right there, I think is your answer, which is get control of your data. Like, we hear people say, or you see headlines all the time, but it makes total sense of like, data is the oil of this century. Whereas, like oil was the asset of, the 20th century and the 21st century. Now it's data as the most valuable resource out there. And, people being able to reclaim ownership of that and being able to get their piece of the pie for being the source of it is, I think, your answer. Would you say?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, the reality is where we are right now. It's super early. It's painful to get access. It's confusing. I mean, just to share one real fun story is, like I told you, we had these really great ROIs or APRs on Aptos for stablecoins, and this is before we had native stablecoins. So you literally had to go through a bridge. You go through some Ethereum blockchain to get to Aptos, and we had both Wormhole and we had Layer 0 USDC. I'm like, cool. I'm going to go both paths. And so for Layer 0, they actually have this really cool thing where it doesn't matter what blockchain you use, it always ends up on Aptos being canonical Layer 0 USDC. I'm like, cool, I'll do the same thing on Wormhole. So I go to Avalanche, I bring over my USDC over there, and then I wormhole it over to Aptos. And I get over to Aptos, and I have this thing called USDC AV. And I'm like, what the heck is this? It's not liquid at all. So I'm like, oh my God, did I just create a dead end where I now have burnt out all my money? But it gets worse than that, because I brought over a bit more than I probably should have in my first transaction. And when I sent it back over to Avalanche, it got stuck. And no warning message, just no progress. And I could literally see and I didn't know how to debug it. So I'm like over here freaking out, sweating, dying, and like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this. I'm scared that I'm going to get embarrassed or in trouble for burning the family's fortune on crypto and not even getting anything for it except a really shitty story. And so I dug in, I found, okay, it's actually stuck in some sort of wormhole relayer. And apparently the reason why is it went over a certain threshold and I just have to wait 24 hours. But nobody confirmed that. This was just me kind of piecing together a bunch of errant information. Like I literally went on the Wormhole Discord and said what's going on, and they didn't give me anything. And so, every 5 minutes for the next 24 hours, I go and I try to push the transaction forward, very calm, collected. And so finally, after 24 hours, it goes through. I say, oh, shoot, no sweat. I knew this was going to be perfectly fine all along.
Of course.
No, all along.
I was so.
Meanwhile, you wring out your shirt.
Yes. It was the worst experience of my life. And I'm like, Web3, thank you for making me really understand how dangerous this stuff can be. And if I'm going through this, and all the PhD, all that stuff aside, the years of technology, like, holy crap, how can we expect users that are not or are modestly technical to do anything remotely like this? I remember my dad called me up one day and said, David, I'm trying to print something. I can't figure out what's going on. Can you come visit me? I went over to his house. He lived 30 minutes away, so it's not an easy trip. I go and I look at the printer. I'm like, dude, it's not on. You forgot to flip you didn't flip the switch. He's like, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't. And I'm like, dude, this is the type of users that we are trying to get Web3 to. Yep. And like the gap is huge. So it's a really exciting opportunity that we're in to go to that long-term future of owning your data, owning your identity, to just like figuring out how you get a Robinhood like experience to where you don't have to freak out that you just might have lost, your family's fortunes in the nethers of Web3.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do love exploring just protocols and pieces of the industry that I haven't looked at in a long time and seeing what has improved over the last how long. The anecdote I had from the other day was walking my mom through setting up something on Anchor and just being blown away by how easy it had gotten since the last time I had looked at just trying to set up a simple stake. The dashboard was completely revamped and all this sort of stuff. And I was just like, God damn, I don't remember it being like that. And, the more I start to poke around, I'm like, okay, because I know exactly what you're talking about, making terrible decisions that led to, hours of panic as you're sitting there like, oh God, what have I done? And a lot of, we have ways to go, but it is improving honestly faster than I sort of expected it to. And so I'm more optimistic, honestly, than I was, just because that user experience that we're discussing is just to tie it back to that question, which is so good. Like, what problems do people actually have that they are interested in getting a solution for? And especially as you talk about the seamlessness of it, the thing I've been hearing a lot lately is the first billion are not going to know that they're using this sort of stuff. It's just going to sort of be there. It's going to enhance some piece of their life in some way. And I think, you strip it all back, what are we left with is just this idea that, wouldn't it be cool if we weren't being relentlessly extracted from 24/7 without getting anything worthwhile in return? And so, I mean, you talk
but
about,
it's all I've ever known, and I'm scared of the new things.
No, but honestly, yeah, because you'll hear people say this, like, minor little piece of convenience is worth all of that, which really just goes to show me how little we understand about, exactly like you're talking about, David. How much are you worth as a target of an ad to a group like Facebook compared to what it could be if you had more ownership of that data delivery relationship? And I mean, I'm just that is the thing that just gets me out of bed every morning, is thinking about, like, people have no clue how big the advantage that's being taken of them truly is. It's exciting to hear people like you talk about it, just because it's refreshing to know that that's still in everyone's heads as they're building these networks, which are truly incredible vehicles.
On that note, David, I want to be respectful of your time, and you've given us so much to think about. The comments have been really, really helpful. Somebody said, David is the final boss of devs. And before we do our final thoughts, we tally up the point totals. I would really love it if you'd tell people, you teased it a little, you can't talk too loose-lipped, but there's some stuff coming up for Aptos. And if people want to get involved with Aptos, where can they go, and what should they be paying attention to? We've got a couple of the handles here on screen, but we'd love to hear it from you, especially if people are interested maybe in using the tech, building the tech, or they're already building and maybe they need funding or they need help, or they just want to participate and contribute.
That
what are
first
your words of wisdom.
That first user experience, right? Like, if someone's never gotten to experience it at all, where should someone first go? You can use me as an example. I'm a stablecoin maxi. Hear you talk about stablecoins. I'm stoked. So, that's like my first stop is, okay, where can I take some stablecoins over to Aptos, and then what do I do with them? Or then, whatever else comes to mind.
Yeah. So I guess I'd say there's probably two paths depending on how advanced you are. If you're that folk that says, I have to use the extension, I need my hardware crypto, I definitely go down to, get the Petra extension from the Google Chrome store. And, you can then get your account there. You can go to Coinbase or whatever your favorite centralized exchanges, or you can even use MoonPay or whatever is in the app, but you pay a bit higher fee over there. So probably skip that. You get a little bit of APT because you don't really need much, and you get your stables, and you send it over to your account over there on Petra, and then you head over to something like Aries Markets, and you begin your process there. You go to VibrantX and you explore that. So that's probably the moderate advanced user. I think if you want to go with, like, you want to just send something to your parents and say these 3 steps, and you're making solid profits, more than you'd make in a money market. You say go download the Petra mobile. Maybe you say go get the coins from the centralized exchange, but I think we actually now allow you to buy stables directly inside of the app itself.
Nice.
So you can get a little bit of APT, a little bit of the stables, USDC or USDT, and go straight into the Petra earn and start making 10% gains right there.
Beautiful. And as far as what's coming up next and where they should go for updates, is the best place at Aptos on Twitter or at Aptos Labs? What would you recommend?
I would say those are the two best handles to kind of follow along with the great tech. You start following that. Those handles, the folks behind those handles doing a phenomenal job of just tracking all the alpha in the ecosystem, doing the great retweets, so you can actually learn about the broader ecosystem. If you follow me on Twitter, every now and then I'll go and deep dive into one of our protocols and just share my experiences about that, so I can bring broader awareness from like a user perspective about these. But there's a pretty phenomenal just group of folks out there that are giving insights, and that's going to be something that we're going to see a lot more happening with the revamp of the collective again, as thanks to our good friend Poan. So this is really the right time to start getting part of the Aptos Alpha and making it, giving us feedback on how we can improve our communication, because it is, even though we're we're roughly 2 years into this, 2.5 years into this. I'd say like there's still a lot of opportunity to make it much better, and it's really hard because everything at Aptos is just new. We're not benefiting from the work that has been paved by the Ethereum communities and the Solana community. So it's a lot of hard work, and we're looking for folks that can really come in and be part of that ecosystem to make the doors swing wide open.
Will you guys be at any conferences coming up soon? Our friend Joe wanted to know if you'd be in Toronto for Consensus.
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing quite a few events in Consensus. I don't think we've made it quite public yet. I can try to search up all the things we're going to do, but if you follow me on Twitter, I will definitely be sharing out. I'll be actually there. Pawan will be there. My good buddy Greg Nazario, another one of the co-founding engineers, will be there.
Well, we'll see you there.
Yep, and we'd love to chat with you folks, and we can share more stuff that's not recorded and get into more fun and dangerous things.
Oh, on the Friend DA. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
Okay.
on the Friend DA. Yeah.
Okay, so if you are just tuning in or you've been with us the whole time, this is David Wolinsky. You got to check him out at David_Wolinsky, spelled like it sounds, but we'll have it in the show notes over on X. He is one of the big co-founding team, head architect and head of Degengineering, nice title, over at Aptos. So, man, thank you so much for your time. We're going to do a quick tally to see how David did in our points contest tonight. But first, I've got to read a couple of the others. In last place with one Gwump, Sam Bankman-Fried with the crazy hair. Sorry, Sam. Thanks for playing. In next to last place with a point I'm giving myself right now, it's me. Alex, congratulations. You got 3 points tonight. Will, you got 4 points. And that means the winner of our show this evening is our guest, David, with 7 points. You ran away with it, man. I cannot believe it. So now we before we give you your roses and ride our dogs and ponies into the sunset, I would love to hear a final thought. If you've got a last-minute question, a suggestion, a good joke, a word of wisdom, then be sure to leave it in the comments. And then I would invite you to check out the Rise Up Discord server if you've got a question you don't want to disappear forever. It's the easiest way to connect with all of us after the show. If you were like, wait, what's that thing that David said? That's the best place for us to see it. And of course, you can find the Discord link and all of our socials, as well as past episodes at theriseupmorningshow.com. It's a wonderful place. All that's missing, my friend, is you. So it's about that time. We got to ride these dogs and ponies off into the sunset.
Forgot you had that sound.
Man, isn't it great? I love it. David is our honored guest. We will let you give your final thought first. Do you have a final thought, good joke, word of wisdom for our audience tonight?
Oh, no more thoughts at this point in time. I just really appreciate this opportunity to come to your show. I really enjoyed the vibes. I've enjoyed the conversation. I think you guys are building something really, really special here, and I'm just really happy to be part of it. And I hope, for folks that are interested in Aptos, feel free to reach out to me. My DMs are open on Twitter. I care mostly more about anything about like building the right culture, building the right environment. That starts at Aptos, where we internally, we're really focused on making sure everybody's enthusiastic about what they're building, who they're building it for. That's you. And I personally take that very seriously. That's why I go to things like Consensus. That's why I answer all of the DMs that I get on Twitter or Telegram. And, I'd be happy to be in touch with anybody that wants to learn more about what's going on here at Aptos. So just again, thank you all. Thank you, Evan, Alex, and Will for allowing me to be here and be part of this really great thing that you've built here.
Man, truly a pleasure. Alex, final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I would thank you also, David, for making the time to be here. It's a long, but these kinds of conversations are so valuable just because I feel like we don't get to have them enough. And I'm going to use my final thought to ask you one more question in rapid fire, because you set me up for it. In my defense, you set me up for it, and it's too late for Evan to gwump me for asking another question. So
this is true.
Although
we'll start
Evan,
early for next week.
Yeah, at -1 already.
Take that back. I love getting to the points totals and remembering who you gave like a single solitary gwump to like an hour and a half ago that we've all
Sam
forgotten about. So
yeah.
Sam Bankman-Fried getting gwumped is a good one. But David, we had a couple people in the audience just asking about grants, and I know obviously you guys do have a grant program. Is there anything in particular that you guys are most interested in inviting people who have ideas and who are maybe interested in the grant circuit to check out Aptos?
It's a great question. I'd say we're actually kind of going through a bit of an exploration right now, because I think it's particularly hard for people that are submitting ad hoc grants to get recognition, because you got to imagine that email box is getting a lot of emails, a lot of different proposals. And to be frank with you, I think we as an organization recognize that it's not necessarily getting all the attention and emphasis that it needs. So what we're doing is we're going to change that narrative, and it's still forthcoming. So give me another month and you'll probably see some posts coming out. But we want to get everybody focused on hacking on Aptos. And so the concept here is you hack on us for a little bit. It gives us visibility into the dedication and focus in the reality of what you're capable of building, and gets you, a faster pathway to actually getting grants, because it's taking away all the ambiguity that goes through the typical grants process. So that's going to be the forefront of where we're going to be focused on. Now, with that being said, we're not going to be killing any of the legacy grant processes we've had. They're still going to exist. I would definitely recommend people to think about what hackathon type of things that they'd like to be engaged with, and go down that path. Now, if you want to submit the grants, I'd say a big area of opportunity is always going to be in making it easy to get into Aptos for the first time. And there's a lot of opportunities there, from there, building out, new wallet experiences or features, or improving, I think VibrantX did a good job, but there's probably a lot more meat that we could be producing in terms of just better engagement with inside the DeFi protocols, new trading opportunities, but I think the reality is it's really open. And so I don't want to necessarily eliminate that. But I'll say one other one, because it was something that came up last, maybe a month and a half ago. I got put on the spot that I had to somehow give a 45-minute keynote on AI. And I'm just like, wow, I've never.
Like, you have PhDs?
Yeah.
It's all the same, right?
Yeah, it just rolled right out of me. But I didn't know what to talk about. So I spent the next 24 hours just studying AI. And what dawned on me is, I think what Web3 is really lacking is it's just so hard to do things, but it's so hard from an engineering perspective to build them all out. And so I think AI can deal with a lot of these nuances of like making developers not have to handle 100% of the possible cases, like all the things that can happen, all the failure cases. You go back to my wormhole example. If AI existed, it would probably be able to say, hey, David, we can detect where your transaction is. And we've seen this before, wait 24 hours. And so I'd love to get to the point where, maybe the AI or maybe something just really helps the developer make their applications much more user-friendly. And removing how much time it takes to actually get a really good product. Because what you're seeing on a lot of Web3 is that developers are so focused on getting their product to market that they're skipping over a lot of the nuts and bolts that are so critical for when users do something a little bit outside of expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 100%.
Excellent. Alex, so classic to use your final thought to ask one more question. You're an educator to the core, man. I appreciate that about you. Now I'm dying. Sorry. William, save me from myself. Do you have
I don't know if I have a piece of sage wisdom or advice to give to people. All I'm going to say is, David, thanks for in all the examples that you used today. It was always Alex giving me 5 of something. So I just want to say I appreciate that.
I'm leaving cards over there.
And I'm going to now, next time I see Alex, just try to steal 5 magic cards for him, particularly because you have my lobster church game. Anyway. No, I have no sage piece of advice to give, but David, thank you for hopping on, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and my final thought is just going to be to say one more time, if you want to find us, theriseupmorningshow.com is the best place. You can find David on Twitter, and we will be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, live right here with our friend Gerard from Wave Digital Assets. He's an early stage venture capitalist, to continue the conversation about what makes a token valuable. What can a token do beyond just giving you a vehicle for liquidity, for trading, and to dream a little about the future as we answer your crypto questions. If that sounds like fun, then you know where to be. These are our only social media profiles. If you see somebody who looks like me reach out to you to invite you to use a copy trading bot, or somebody who looks like David reaches out to you and says, how is your investing going? Then you know that's not us.
Never answer that man.
Never
or
answer that
attractive
man.
woman. Usually an attractive woman. It's
Oh,
the
man.
profile ID.
There's no attractive woman, I'm sorry to tell you, and there is no free Bitcoin. We will never message you first directly. The best way to get in touch with us is to give us a follow and reach out, and we'll do our best to answer you. So with that, my friends, and especially David, thank you again for all that you do. Until next time, everybody, stay safe, be well, rise up.